or 20 in this case, Oregon is such a live backdoor cover. So to me, I like Ohio State in the first half. I think they'll come out strong. I think Fresno's secondary will be an issue. I think Ohio State will be able to get some pressure. So I like the Buckeyes first half, and I lean with the over for the game.
I like it, Ralph. And coming back to you on the Thibodeau injury, likely first player picked in the NFL draft on the defensive side of the ball. Just because you've been doing this, successfully for a while here, Ralph, talking about being a sports bettor, do you ever try to become doctor and say, hey, is he going to play? Is he not? Or how do you handle these type of situations with top line players?
Well, there's very few defensive players that are going to move the number in college football. And really the number hasn't moved because of Thibodeau. So you use it as your advantage. One thing I actually like, Drew, if I'm playing against an injury, I hope the guy is likely to play, isn't listed as out, because you're usually not going to get 100%, especially if he's not practicing. Sometimes when you do get that frontline player and you're playing against that team, once that player says he's out, the needle moves, so you're losing the value. So there is no one set case, but in this instance, Thibodeau makes enough of a factor where, I think he's worth a point and a half, just because Ohio State has such a young quarterback. We saw him get happy feet early. He settled down in the second half once Ohio State established a lead and he wasn't playing even or behind like he was in the first half.
I like it, Ralph. Good stuff there. And Robbie, coming to you next, the Horseshoe kicking off Saturday, kind of an early kick here, 12 noon Eastern, nationally televised game. Of course, Ohio State and Oregon. This is a big one, man. What are you thinking in the Horseshoe?
Yeah, well, the time difference certainly is a factor here, Drew. Unlike the other West Coast to East Coast game, Washington to Michigan, that game's played at 8 o'clock at night, which really helps the West Coast team out. Here, when you're playing at a 9 o'clock West Coast body clock, that makes a bit of a difference. But this situation for Ohio State, just to set it up here, is a lot like the Iowa situation this week, right? Iowa plays Indiana, a very tough conference foe right off the bat, and then has to come right back and play non-conference Iowa State, a rival. Ohio State plays a very tough conference foe in Minnesota, barely survives. Some would say that if Muhammad Ibrahim didn't get hurt, maybe Minnesota even wins the game, and they have to come right back now and play Oregon, a very tough non-conference foe. So both teams in similar situations here for this week. Like Ralph said about the Oregon defense, the Ohio State defense showed it's really not to be trusted here either. Minnesota ran for 203. They threw for 205. Again, Ibrahim had holes all game long to run through, and C.J. Verdell and that Oregon offensive line, we'll see what they can do against Ohio State defensively here. So both teams have defensive issues for sure. It's interesting in that first quarter of the Oregon-Fresno State, like Ralph says, and I was a guy who was holding a first half over ticket, over 30.5, and I get a touchdown with about 16 seconds left in the first half. Really a miracle over, got pulled out there. But it looked as if Fresno State wasn't going to move the ball all game long for about the first 4 series. Oregon defenders started dropping like flies. They lost 2 and 3 plays. Then they lost Thibodeau a couple plays later. And Fresno State started moving the ball in the second quarter. So we'll see. The pass rush looked pretty good. It's hard to lay 14 with Ohio State at this point in time with that defense. The quarterback situation might be the biggest deal here, guys, because, Ralph described the C.J. Stroud situation, unsettled. Once he got his feet under him, he played pretty well in the second half. I give credit to Ohio State for what I think are some real good adjustments. You could have a little back and forth. I had a guy say to me yesterday that he wanted to throw the Minnesota defensive coordinator under the bus because in the second half, Ohio State came out, and although one was kind of a screen pass that was taken 70 yards, Ohio State came out in the second half throwing vertically and had a lot of success. I tended to look at that as real good adjustments by the Ohio State coaching staff in the second half. They found something that was to their liking, and they certainly executed it for the positive until it got stopped. We'll see if they can throw deep on Oregon. Again, I think that a lot of the stuff that Ralph is saying, I totally agree with where these defenses are concerned. Now, can these defenses make strides from week 1 to week 2 against the opposing offenses? It's it's very iffy because these offenses are so explosive. You know, Ohio State's problems on defense are said to be by insiders related to scheme. And I guess it would have to be because when you have that much talent running around on the field, it can't possibly be the talent. They've got to be doing something wrong here. So for me, Drew, I think, you know, if it wasn't such an early game, I might feel even stronger about an overplay here. I certainly don't think Ohio State's going to be stopped. And to that end, I don't think that Oregon's going to really be stopped either by this Ohio State defense off of what I saw. So it'd probably be a slight lean toward over and perhaps, you know, taking points, although the situational aspect of this with the time isn't great. I'm sure Oregon will have something worked out this week to get their body clocks right. So maybe plus points is worth a look as well.
Good stuff from both Ralph and Robbie here. And yeah, Ralph,
Drew,
the pen is up, man. Take it away.
One more point I want to bring up, actually 2 points. Rob, one thing different between Ohio State this week and Iowa State is Ohio State played Thursday at home and home again. So you have the 2 extra days and no travel, while Iowa played Saturday and is traveling, albeit, you know, an in-state rival. The other thing I do want to mention is Joe Moorhead is the OC now at Oregon. When he was at Penn State beat Ohio State 24-21 and lost 39-38. So his offenses were able to move the ball against the Ohio State defense.
Man, that's a good nugget there. The Joe Moorhead, you know, it's carrying over, Ralph. And that's something you look for in terms of using that information from a few years ago to now him being on the Oregon Ducks, you know, coaching staff and it translating over.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's obviously you don't have the same personnel, but you look at how Oregon recruits, and Oregon's personnel is even with Penn State's. It's not as if though you took a huge step up. It's not as though you took a huge step up talent-wise. You look at the recruiting through the levels, and at least he has the same type of talent, you know, although the pieces on the field are different than he had for the Nittany Lions.
I like it. College Football Daily, best damn college football show portion. That's Ralph Michaels, Robbie Veno, and I am Drew Martin. Catch us here every Wednesday, 4 o'clock Eastern on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. Guys, we got 3 games left. We got Utah and BYU next game up. It's actually nightcap for the show, and nightcap one of the late games on the Saturday slate. Actually, it's a huge late night action for this upcoming Saturday. The Holy War here, Ralph. We're getting Utah, BYU, the Utes laying 7 on the highway. They've taken some money here, bought up from 5.5 at the opener, 49 being the total. You liking anything on Provo, Utah in the late night matchup Saturday, Ralph?
You know, there's only one way I would bet it, and that's Utah, but I don't know if I'll get there. You know, really, when I'm looking at a rival, like this type of rival, I basically look at my power numbers and I take 2 or 3 points off, be it Ohio State, Michigan, be it Army, Navy, be it, you know, any main rival, be it Auburn, Alabama. And for those that don't know, this is as big a rival, even though Utah's won 9 straight. It's not the domination, you know, it's not the domination you like Ohio State, Michigan with the series domination. So, hey, for Johnny Detroit, I just had to throw Ohio State, Michigan in there just for fun. So I hope you're watching and you know, your blue up north can take a little step back. But I look at this series and I look at BYU, and yes, BYU beat Arizona last week, but there's a lot of concerning things when you look at BYU. BYU gained 368 yards at Arizona. On one side, you could say that's not bad for week 1. Well, if you look back at Arizona's defense last year, the fewest yards they gave up in any game was 410. So BYU didn't even reach Arizona's worst game last year. I love Utah. I picked them to win the Pac-12. I took a long shot on them to win the national title. Whittingham 11-5-1 as an away dog. They've gone 13-4 ATS their last 17 road games. You have them off an easy win on Thursday. BYU played late on Saturday. Again, I am all Utah. If it had stayed at the opener at 5.5, I'd be on them as a play. With the number where it is, I'm in that gray zone whether I use them or leave them off my card. But either way, a clear lean for me for the Utah Utes.
I like it, Ralph. And Robbie, coming to you next, both of these two teams 1-0, but 0-1, both of them ATS-wise, falling short of covering the big spreads they were laying. To Ralph's point, BYU, kind of a different team this season than last year. Watching them personally in the bowl game, the Boca Raton Bowl, they looked good in that bowl game. They had big kids on the sidelines. I was looking to kind of bet on them, but sure enough, they only returned, 4 on defense, 6 on offense. This is a lot of new faces here. So in terms of, rating them out, how good this BYU team is, I mean, their quarterback was the second pick in the NFL draft. They're obviously losing a lot there, Robbie. I don't know how to rate this BYU team. I agree with Ralph. If I'm playing, I'm laying with the Utes.
Well, you have to. I mean, there's no other way to look. The problem, as Ralph described, is the price. My power rating showed Utah should be 2.5 in this game. And again, we're talking about a rivalry game, so the number is shortchanged just a little bit, but you're looking at 7 right now. And I think everybody, that watched last week sees exactly what we saw. And I'll talk to even more weaknesses for BYU last week where the secondary and the pass defense is concerned. Remember last week when we were on here, guys, and we were talking about Arizona, and I gave you that giant X in front of my face because Jed Fish is the head coach there, and they're overhauling that offensive system. Gunnar Cruz, the kid who played quarterback last week, is a Washington State transfer, didn't take any snaps from under center until he got to Arizona and, sees Jed Fish, and they're going to make the change to a pro-style offense. So there was a lot of things here, a lot of reasons to think that they would come out of the gate slow throwing the football. Now, granted, they were behind. A lot of this yardage was done in the second half. But if you're BYU and you have 4 quarterback sacks on the night, and, the old saying is you can pin your ears back when the other team has to throw. BYU had shut them down running the football totally. They still couldn't stop this team. A team that is transitioning into a totally different offense was running free all over the place to the tune of 345 yards and 75% completions by Arizona last week. With Charlie Brewer at quarterback on the other side, that could be troublesome. Utah's got a host of returning receivers here, including Britton Covey. So I think that the passing game is probably, as far as both offenses are concerned, they're the best matchup on the field. Utah's pass game against BYU's pass defense. I can't find you a good matchup for BYU offensively. Drew, you said they looked different last year. There's just no explosiveness left in this offense from what I saw against Arizona. It's not like having Zach Wilson where they were going to call plays. And remember, they lost their offensive coordinator here too. So the play calling can be a little bit different. Could be more back to traditional style play calling at BYU. It's not going to work against Utah, which is solid on all 3 lines of defense. And as to last week's game, I put a little bit of stock in that win over Weber State because for those who follow FCS, Weber State is one of your 5 best defenses. They're like Northern Iowa when they played Iowa State. Northern Iowa traditionally one of your 5-6 best defenses in the land where FCS is concerned. Weber State, the same thing. And Utah put 40 on them. And Utah just wore them out. The point spread was a little ridiculously high, knowing the ability of that Weber State defense. But still, Utah scored 40 on that team. And to me, that's a total buy sign on this offense. I like their defense. The only thing in my way, again, is the 7 points at this point in time, but I couldn't play BYU +7. I know it's a rivalry and anything could happen, but I do think there's a significant difference defensively here with these two teams and explosion-wise offensively with these two teams, especially in the pass game.
I was looking for the pen from Ralph Michaels, but I think we're ready to go on to the third game. But Robbie, I do have a question for you, actually, talking about Weber State, because I think that's really good betting information, talking about how good one unit is from an FCS squad, because that information is kind of tough to come by. Comparing Weber State's defense to now who the Utes are going to be playing this week in BYU's defense, how would you kind of rank those two defenses? Would you actually look for Utah to have a better performance maybe this week against BYU's defense?
Well, I think certainly the FBS defense, BYU, is going to be a little bit better. But the point being that Weber State on that level. And remember, when you're talking top-tier teams in FCS football, we saw a couple of upsets and some really close games. Some of these squads, North Dakota State and these others, South Dakota State, they're not that far. And in fact, they probably could be in group of 6 conferences across America and be successful. So I would say, Drew, that the gap between Weber State's defensive ability and BYU's is not all that great. BYU's the better defense, and certainly it's going to be a tougher haul for Utah. But I think scoring 40 on Weber State is really significant. And the fact that Utah under Kyle Whittingham, it's kind of been their MO, right? They'll wear you down. They're so physical. They'll wear you down. And they were still scoring in the fourth quarter. They really started to pull away late third into the fourth in that game where Weber State just couldn't hold up anymore. A, because they couldn't retain possession of the ball at all. Utah's defense was just smothering them. And B, because they just flat wore them out.
Sure, that's good information on the FCS as well, Robbie, in terms of what the Big Sky was 3-0 against FBS opponents, I believe, or something of that nature. I mean, there was a lot of, and in terms of you saying like, it matters in the FCS, absolutely. It's like the FBS. Are we talking Alabama or are we talking Akron? There is a big difference between the quality of these teams. Talking about Division I, Division II, FBS, FCS football here, guys. We got 2 games left, 2:30 Saturday on NBC. We're talking Toledo, the Rockets, and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish here in South Bend, Indiana, Ralph. We're seeing Notre Dame minus 19.5. It opened. I'm seeing minus 17 now. So is this Toledo money, Ralph? 56.5 being the total. You liking anything here, Toledo and Notre Dame, Ralph?
Well, Toledo, the second most experienced team coming back behind Nevada. So both of those teams returned 21 starters. A lot of love for the Rockets. And, Notre Dame in a war last week, an overtime game and less rest and traveling from Tallahassee. And you saw the heat and humidity get to them. But, there's some concern I have. So let's go back and talk FCS for a minute too. You might look at Toledo and you might say, wow, 49-10, they crushed Norfolk State. But if we're going to dive a little deeper, Toledo was laying 39.5, so they don't cover. Toledo at the half had a 165 to 126 yard edge. You're a 39-point favorite, and you only had a 39-yard edge at the half. And my most concerning number, Toledo went back to pass 17 times last week. Quarterback Ellaby was 13 of 17, and they got sacked 3 times. That's once every 17.6 times he goes back to pass. We saw what Notre Dame's D-line did in the first half when they were sending pressure. Second half, they went to a prevent defense and let Florida State back in the game. Don't know why they did that. I expect Notre Dame to run this ball hard. We're talking about an O-line that needs work. Notre Dame's D-line is set. Notre Dame's O-line has 4 starters in new positions this year, so they need some work. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game in the first half. I think Notre Dame's defense does the job in the first half. But Toledo, to me, is wide open for a backdoor cover. If Notre Dame plays any type of defense like they did in the second half in a big lead, the Toledo Rockets look for them backdoor all day long.
Robbie, what are you liking in South Bend on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I'll go a little different approach, Drew, because I think the money that's poured in on the over is correct in this game. Norfolk State, for what it's worth, is, they're out of the MEAC, and they're not a good FCS team. All right, so you're supposed to blow them out. Again, you have to take into consideration there's no game planning for Norfolk State, right? It's kind of like roll the balls out and see what happens. And it's your first half of a new season, and it didn't go Toledo's way. And in the second half, it did go their way. So perhaps all eyes were on Notre Dame in practice, even during Norfolk State week. It was, 2 weeks worth of prep for Notre Dame. I think Ralph hit on a lot of good things, and the weather probably did take its toll on Notre Dame's second half. Mackenzie Milton came in and started firing away after Jordan Travis was out. But it's hard to ignore the run defense for Notre Dame in that game. I mean, they were bad. They allowed 264 rushing yards, and Bryant Koback and this Toledo ground game, the offensive line, they're pretty good. Notre Dame's on a short work week here, and Toledo should, with the balance on offense that they have, and by balance, I'm going to define that by saying they can run the football, they can throw at all three levels, and they can throw to the back out of the backfield, and they use a tight end. So they have all bases covered. It's a lot for a defensive coordinator to prepare for on a short work week. But the same goes for Notre Dame. I mean, the best threat on the field for them in the receiving game is Michael Meyer, the tight end, right? I don't know how Toledo's going to answer that bell. And when I watched Jack Cohn play, I know Notre Dame had real good quarterback play the last couple of years, but boy, Jack Cohn looks like a difference maker back there. Notre Dame suddenly, to me, has the ability to push downfield. I think he threw for 366 and 4 TDs in that game. He's just slicing up Florida State secondary throughout that contest. The one thing that they didn't get going was Kyron Williams at running back. And to me, he's an NFL first or second rounder, and he just never got going. They actually got Kane Madden, a transfer from Marshall, Marshall's best offensive lineman, and in fact, an all CUSA offensive lineman that they thought was going to, plug a hole for them, because they did lose a lot of offensive linemen from last season. They didn't run it real well at all. When Brian Kelly was going off on his tangent at the end of that game, talking about how the offense did not execute, and the defense too, both sides, I think he specifically was referring to his running game. He thought running the football should have been a little easier against Florida State. So I think they'll run it here. Jack Cohn can throw it. I think the other side can run it and throw it. And now we're looking from 52.5 all the way up to 56. At some point, you got to push the stop button, but I don't think it's here. I think you're probably good until 58 in this game. Both offenses, to me, are going to be the best units on the field in this particular contest. And we'll see how Toledo fares point spread-wise, but I do think both teams can score, and this total was really set far too low at 52.5.
Good stuff from both Robbie Veno and Ralph Michaels. We got one game left, guys, as we're going to head to South Florida here for a nationally televised 7 p.m. Eastern primetime game on ESPNU here, Ralph. We're getting App State and the Miami Hurricanes. Fascinating handicap here with the Canes minus 9-point home favorites. Looks like 54.5 being the total. We get the Sun Belt and the ACC. Miami off of a loss. App State won. I don't believe they covered here. Miami Gardens Saturday night. You liking anything here, Ralph?
Well, the technical people are going to be over App State. You have an App State team that is fundamentally sound. Again, a number of returning starters on the high end. They're 8-2 as a dog, getting 5 or more. And then you have a coach for Miami, Manny Diaz, who you just can never bet as a favorite. As a favorite of 7 or more, he's 3-9 with 5 upset losses. 5 upset losses as a favorite of 7 or more in 12 games. That is just absolutely horrific. If you like Miami, you have to make sure that loss against Alabama doesn't cost you 2 losses. How many times have we seen a team be deflated? If you're looking at Miami's schedule at the beginning of the year, you're likely to think, well, App State is going to be a negative spot off the Alabama game and a big game on deck. Now it almost turns into a must-win spot where the Miami Hurricanes are playing with pressure. Another little box score, we've been talking about teams and how they played. You look at Appalachian State, Drew, and you talked about a 14-point win, winning 33-19. That game was 33-9 late in the fourth. They scored 10 late points to make that closer than expected. And with Appalachian State, let's remember, they have the Duke quarterback, Chase Bryce, who played against Miami. Is that a positive or a negative last year he played against Miami for Duke. The good news is he was 20 of 25. Positive, great performance against the Hurricanes. The bad news, he threw for 94 yards and got shut out. It's not very often you throw the ball 25 times and only get 94 yards. So, this game I look at back and forth, and there's no way I can bet Miami. I think Miami, again, you have to think about, they just played the best team in college football by far. So if Miami had played an FCS foe when they won by 30, might I be more interested in playing Miami? I'm not sure of that either. I lean under early. I think Miami has to try to establish the run. I think App State tries to run the ball and shorten the game. So I'm going under first half, and hopefully Mr. Veno is going to give you an opinion on the side, because I've been absolutely torn on this game going back and forth.
Yeah, Robbie, this is a tough one. I mean, to Ralph's point, this is being torn on this one. I don't blame him at all. And I think I mentioned that App State lost ATS. Actually, if you got it at 9, they won, like Ralph said, 33-19 week 1 against ECU. But it's just a fascinating matchup overall, because the Miami Hurricanes themselves, Robbie, going up against Alabama, and now really going up against anybody else in college football, that's kind of obviously going to be a talent downgrade. So how well are they going to perform here? And you're getting a Sun Belt team, which you would think is even more of a drop-off in talent, but this is a good Sun Belt team. App State, one of the teams, we talked about it earlier, they could win the Sun Belt Conference. Wouldn't be too surprising. They're having to go on the road here, Hard Rock Stadium. How tough of a place is it to play? At times, it can be a very tough place. I don't know if they're going to show up and show out in South Florida for App State. That remains to be seen. This is a good one, though, Saturday night, Robbie.
Yeah, it is, Drew. And a couple of things here. And I'm going to give you the view of a person who had East Carolina plus points in that Appalachian State game. I think I talked about this earlier with you, Drew, on a different show. They had a touchdown at halftime, a Hail Mary pass that was completed, ruled a touchdown on the field, would have cut the lead to, I think, 20-12 at the time. They went to review. That play was overturned to the dismay of the announcers and a lot of other people, but it was overturned. Had it not been overturned, had it stood, that's an East Carolina cover. Now, the game really wasn't that close, but it's an East Carolina cover nonetheless, if in fact that doesn't get overruled. So they weren't that, point spread wise, Appalachian State wasn't that dominant in that game, but statistically they were. And I think anybody with two eyes that watched it would say they're certainly the better team. ECU got a quick touchdown right off the bat, and then after that it was mostly all Appalachian State. A couple of things here, Drew. And Ralph hit on an awful lot of it, but as I said to you before, you worry about Miami's mindset, and Ralph covered it as well. Where do they go? This is not a conference game. It's not like Appalachian State stands in the way of a potential berth in the ACC title game. Those games are yet to be played for Miami. So how much interest do they put into it? I'm not sure. We don't know, but Ralph just gave you Manny Diaz's record as a favorite. So master motivator, I guess he's not as far as favorites are concerned. I just think from what I saw out of Chase Bryce now in an Appalachian State uniform, and we've seen a lot of App State the last few years with a couple of quarterbacks. They love their dual threats. Taylor Lamb, and I'm missing the other kid's name, the two that have played the last 4 or 5 years. But Bryce throws the football like none of them did. And you look at that 20 of 27, and again, I know it's ECU's defense, and this isn't the same here, but Miami can be shredded at times too. There's no sure bet that they're going to come and play really good pass defense. Bryce just throws the ball differently than these previous Appalachian State quarterbacks have thrown it, and that gives them a new dimension of explosiveness. They scored 33 last week. I think they can put up points here. If Miami's not ready, they'll catch Miami by surprise, and they'll score, and they'll score, and they'll score again. Because, again, this is an offense that is predicated on the run, But then off of that run, they play action as well as anybody. They RPO as well as anybody, other than the top elite teams in the country. So I think they can move the football. I think they can score. And on the other hand, I think De'Ara King, again, Ralph said it. They just played the best team in college football by far. Anything they look at defensively is going to look way easier than Alabama. Not that Appalachian State's a bad defense, but when De'Ara King and company go up to the line of scrimmage, it's not the same. It's not the same speed. It's not the same pass rush. It's not the same jamming up the holes against the running game. It's none of that. I think he could have a big day here as well. This total sits in the mid-50s, and I know the early trend, Ralph pointed it out, towards the unders. But to me, these look like games that have been over-adjusted. When I look at Toledo, Notre Dame, and I look at App State, Miami, over-adjusted to the low side. I'm going to be on over here. I think that both of these quarterbacks are more than capable of leading the offenses downfield, and we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that Miami defensively sleepwalks a little bit and gets surprised by Appalachian State, but I don't think that De'Ara King on the other side will have 2 bad games in a row. So I'm going to look for over the number here.
Ralph, I was waiting for you to jump in here, man, and feel free to chime in on this game, Ralph. I also have a question for you, Ralph, in terms of, the over-unders, what you talked about, and it being an under week 1, which it was. Are you looking for that to continue? Because I believe it was the lowest week 1 scoring output in college football for over a decade. And we know how college football has been trending towards more scoring. So my question to you is, do you look for that to continue in week 2? And also, because I think some of this has to do with COVID-19 and defenses not practicing tackling as much. Do you think there's any correlation to that in week 1 of the NFL, maybe, heading to the professional ranks, this being an under trender for week 1?
Well, Herb Street brought it up a couple times where he said he thought this would be a lower scoring year just because, an offense player can break a play and all of a sudden get 80 yards. But in defense, you need cohesiveness, you need communication. How many plays do we see that the tight end runs wide open because the defense didn't communicate? Last year, they had no practice. Now you have so many returning starters on the defensive side that teams have communicated. We've also got used to the scoring where the totals are much higher than they've been. And that'll be interesting to see in the NFL as well. So, will it last? I don't know, but I think we will see an adjustment in the totals. The scoring may stay the same, but I think the results will change because we know Vegas, after a 65% week, the numbers tend to drop a little bit. And if there's another under week, they'll drop again. So if the scoring stays the same, the results change, but, the Vegas number changes. NFL week 1, last year, the scoring they had, having no fans, we know how much fans can rile up defenses. We know that fans make it much more difficult for offenses to communicate. So, yeah, there's a bunch of little reasons that, is it going to be a huge under all year? No. But I certainly think twice this season compared to last. Last year, I went into it thinking overs. This year, I'm going back to my normal process where I've always liked betting unders because I feel there's more value. I think Vegas adjusts every total a half point or a point to the high side because you're always going to get Joe Public betting the favorite and betting the over, especially on the isolated games midweek.
Sure, that's good stuff, Ralph. I totally agree with you. It's tough to smack, or you normally see Vegas getting smacked around for multiple weeks in a row talking about the sports book, so they will make the adjustment pretty quickly. But guys, we are running up against it time-wise, getting towards the end of the show. Robbie, any thoughts on that? Also, final thoughts for the show, and I guess your most confident selection of the games we talked about, or best bet for the show, buddy?
Let me just jump in real quick here and just give you a fundamental reason why scoring. And if you listen to enough Big 12 coaches talk, you'll hear them say, because they're the guys that have absolutely been crucified as the people who don't play defense in the Big 12. And John Heacock, the defensive coordinator for Iowa State, a couple of years back, search of a way to stop the spread, came up with like this 3-2-6, basically dropping 8 in coverage, which is the new rage in college football. It's taken every conference by storm, and everybody's starting to drop 8 in order to protect against explosive plays. So the Big 12, you listen to enough coaches talk, and they'll tell you that they believe scoring will be down some in the Big 12 for that reason. Mike Leach at Mississippi State said every time his team comes out of the huddle, they're facing drop 8 coverage. So there's little fundamental reasons why as well. And now it's time for the offense to adjust back. So we'll see. And I think where totals are concerned, those numbers, those outrageous numbers that became commonplace, 67.5, 69. We saw 74 with Ole Miss still almost got to 74. If they didn't kneel on it at the end of the game, they would have scored again. But those numbers are probably the ones you want to be wary of and start looking more towards those lower numbers. We talked about a couple of them today, 54.5, 55, mid-50s with explosive offenses. Those I think you can capitalize on, but these ones that are way up in the stratosphere might be the ones that you just miss on this year because of some of the reasons Ralph described, and I think there's fundamental reasons to go along with that as well. As far as a best bet for this show is concerned, I'll stick by the Toledo Notre Dame game. I think it's going over the number, Drew. We're looking at 56 right now. I think it's safe up until 58, so I'll give you that as a best bet for the show. Toledo Notre Dame over.
All right, rev them up there in South Bend. And Ralph, any final thoughts from you, man? It's always good to talk with you some college football here. Final thoughts for the show? Maybe a strongest
Drew,
bet?
I'm going to throw out a best bet from a play that I'm going to have on my card, not one we talked about. And I'm going to play against Arkansas, probably the most misleading final in college football week 1. That game was tied 17-17 in the fourth quarter. They end up beating Rice 38-17 by 21, covering by 1 point. Texas didn't manhandle ULL, and in fact, early ULL held their own. But I think some of the Texas talent came out in the second half. I think Sark will have this team ready to play. I like Texas minus the points at Arkansas.
I like it. The Longhorns against Arkansas. And that game, that was one of the worst bad beats if you had Rice, Ralph. That plus the points, man.
Horrible.
That was a rough one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And guys, I'll end it here. The Utes -7. I like the new quarterback transfer there. Well-coached team. I think they got the talent advantage. We heard Robbie talking about it on the outside as well. So guys, come back and join us next Wednesday as well. Best damn college football show as part of the College Football Daily here. Ralph Michaels, Robbie Veno. Check out their packages, WagerTalk.com. I am Drew Martin. Pens up, boys. There we go. Best bets right there.
Right,
best of luck if you're tailing. We'll talk next week.
We've rolled back our football prices. WagerTalk's first full year was 2015, and we've lowered our football season packages to match what we charged that football season. Why? It's simple. We want to make our season-long packages an extraordinary value. You can buy a full college football season or full NFL season for only $5.99 each. But if you buy a college football NFL combo from the same handicapper, you pay only $8.99. Looking to mix and match handicappers? We have you covered. Just email support@wagertalk.com for a bundle discount and to create any handicapper combo you can dream of. Would you like to bet $20 and win $100 at BetMGM regardless of your wager's outcome and get $100 in free wager bucks? Just go to wt.bet